Hello, and welcome to this calm little corner where I chat with other coaches about how organization helps us become our highest selves. Today, I am joined by a very special guest, Nicole Matthiesen. She is a wellness coach, an Ayurvedic health advisor, and the founder of NM Yoga and Wellness. Through online courses, group coaching, and one-on-one coaching and consultations, Nicole helps her clients adopt the habits and the diet that really ignite the body to naturally heal and thrive. Thanks for being here, Nicole.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
I am so excited to chat because I personally first started becoming interested in learning more about Ayurveda when I was in India at the beginning of 2019 for my friend Anisha's wedding. And since that first introduction to Ayurveda, I then tried to learn more about traditional Chinese medicine and to understand how those overlap in what is that? This is like my Venn diagram, right?
Right, yeah.
where like the philosophy and the principles really come together. But it wasn't until we connected that I started considering how organization and Ayurveda overlap.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I never thought of it like that, but the more we've been talking about it, I see very clearly how they are intertwined. And as I mentioned to you, there's a whole part of Vedic philosophy called Vastu that deals with space. It's often referred to as the what's the Japanese, the Feng shui of India, right? But which is kind of a bummer, right? It's just like it's its own thing. But yeah,
it is its own thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so why don't we just jump into it? For those people who are not familiar with Ayurveda, can you briefly describe what it is and what are the three doshas?
Yeah. So Ayurveda is the world's oldest holistic healing system, and it comes from India. It's considered the sister science to yoga. So back in the mid 1800s, when the British came to India, they actually banned the practice of Ayurveda. And so it's only been in recent years that it's starting to see more of an emergence here in the West. And they're finding that Ayurvedic practices are really healing for a lot of these modern day illnesses and ailments that have Western medicine sort of scratching their heads in terms of finding an effective treatment or cure. So that's pretty exciting for me because I love Ayurveda, and I'll tell you a little bit more about my story if you're interested. But so so Ayurveda is it's holistic. So it looks at everything, and its main goal is to, if someone is experiencing a symptom or they have a disease, the idea is to really focus on resolving the root of the problem. In Western medicine, we tend to address symptoms. But Ayurveda really likes to look at the root cause. And the root cause is usually an imbalance in one or more of the doshas. So the doshas so Ayurveda looks at everyone as having a very unique constitution. So everyone has all three of these doshas. And the dosha is, the best word to describe it is really a bioenergy. So it's in all of nature. It's not just the mind-body type that we might have heard about Ayurveda through. But so that we all have all three, and the three are Kapha, Pitta, and Vata. And we all were born with a very unique proportion of these. So I have a lot of Vata, I have a lot of Pitta, I don't have much Kapha. And so if I have a headache and someone else has a headache that's got a different constitution than me, how we would treat that might be very different. So I may have a headache because I've got a Vata imbalance. Someone else may have a headache because they've got a Kapha imbalance. So it's not just take an aspirin, it's let's bring that Kapha dosha into balance, or let's bring that Vata dosha into balance. Does that make sense?
Yeah. They need you to sort of go into a little bit more detail about, what are the energies that make up Kapha,
Yeah.
or Vata and Pitta?
Yeah. So each of the doshas is made up of two of the elements. So Pitta dosha is made up of fire and a little bit of water. It's mostly fire though. Kapha dosha is earth and water. And Vata is air and ethers, or another word for ether is space. And so Vata has, because it's air and space, it's got sort of this, it's often called the windy dosha. So it's about movement. It can be very drying. It's cool. So we look at things in terms of their qualities. So fire and water for Pitta. So fire, Pitta is, it's very fiery. It's got a lot of passion. It's also in charge of like all the transformation or metabolical activity that happens in the body. And then earth and water of Kapha dosha. So earth and water, when you mix them together, they're like mud, right? So they're that heaviness, they're that structure. So when we think of our bodies, these doshas show up in different ways. So as I mentioned, Pitta governs, or Pitta represents all the metabolic activities that happen, all of the chemical transformations, like turning our food into nutrients. Kapha dosha, it's the structure of the body. So the bones, the teeth, the hair, the nail, the muscles, all that stuff. That's Kapha dosha, the tissues really. And then Vata dosha is more ethereal. So it governs all of the movement in the body. So for instance, if you're having trouble thinking or you're feeling kind of scattered, it's probably because there's an imbalance in Vata. And Vata really needs that structure. It needs that Kapha dosha to help keep it contained so that it can function at its best. Or if you're having like constipation issues, can be an issue with Vata because it's very drying and the movement isn't happening like it's supposed to.
Interesting, because I would have thought, because if Pitta is kind of governing the metabolism, like, could there be like too much fire then,
There
or not enough
can.
fire affecting?
So definitely. So if Pitta is out of balance, so if there's too little Pitta, your food is probably just not going to get digested very well. It's going to just kind of sit there. It's not going to get transformed into those nutrients that we really need. So if, on the other hand, if there's too much Pitta, it can go the other way where things are kind of just going right through you and you're going to the bathroom all the time. Yeah.
This is really lovely conversation.
I know. We talk a lot about digestion in Ayurveda.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I don't know how it is in other households, but like this is always the topic in my family. Like my parents are very open about their movement.
Oh, that's so good. No, I feel like we should talk about it more because it's really so important to our health. Like what's happening in our gut is a reflection of what's happening in in the rest of our bodies and our minds.
Yeah, let's normalize that.
Yeah.
This conversation is a good step forward.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think we see a lot of, like as you just said, a lot of what's going on in our minds and our bodies, right? Or that's reflected in our digestive system. Can it kind of like work the other way? Like could dosha imbalances be revealed by our environment, our physical environment?
Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, if we are in, well, let's just say if we go outside and it's really windy, that's going to aggravate Vata. It's going to throw Vata out of balance because it's the windy dosha, right? So it's just kind of giving everything free rein to happen. If it's raining outside, that could aggravate Kapha dosha because it's got a lot of water in it. So it may throw that out of balance. And so the way we, in Ayurveda, the way we work with imbalances is we bring in opposite qualities to help bring that balance. So for instance, so Vata also has this quality of being cold. And so we want to bring in something opposite to balance Vata. So something as simple as drinking a glass of hot water can help bring Vata in balance, just bringing that warmth to the body.
Cool. And I guess I'm just starting to think, so like when it's really cold, right, there's Vata imbalance, and so that's why we just want to stay in bed all day. Is that us seeking Kapha energy?
Yeah, well,
Or am I I'm just trying to like work through this.
yeah, no, especially if there is a Vata imbalance before it gets cold and then it's just taken further out of balance, then yes, that would make us want to just like curl up in bed and not want to get out of bed all day. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And then you had also mentioned that sometimes if you feel like really scattered, that can also be a sign of a Vata imbalance.
Yeah. So a lot of the anxiety that we're seeing right now and just that scattered mind, that's a Vata imbalance, because it's that windy dosha, just blowing our thoughts all over the place to the past, to the future, rather than just being present, rather than being contained in the structure of our mind, right? So that's Vata imbalance blowing all around. And so one of the best things to do is to do something that's grounding, that brings Vata back into the present. So doing a breath practice or just sitting still.
Yeah.
Or one of the things I like to do when I'm feeling a lot of imbalance in Vata dosha is go into child's pose and just get grounded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's given me such a great idea for how to work with clients, because I think sometimes what I see in people's spaces are, these unfinished projects,
Yes.
like stuff physically scattered around, and it'd be really helpful just to take a moment before trying to address any of that physical clutter, to ground yourself through breath work, or I love the child's pose.
Yeah.
It's so basic and almost like primal, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like returning to the womb for a
Yeah,
bit.
I love that. Great. Can you talk to us a little bit about the Ayurvedic clock and how that relates to the doshas?
Yeah.
Because you mentioned that Ayurveda is holistic, right? It's not just mind, body. It's not just the elements in nature. It also
Yeah.
governs time.
Yeah. So the doshas are in everything in nature, and they also are, they govern different parts of the day. So Ayurveda has what we call the dosha clock. And basically, this clock tells us the best times to sleep, to eat, to do creative work, to problem solve, exercise, all the things. And it's the best times of days where you're going to optimize that activity. So for instance, we want to go to bed by 10 p.m. according to the Ayurvedic clock, because from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m., that time is governed by Pitta dosha. And during that time, Pitta is taking care of all of these really, life-sustaining processes. And if we're up past 10 p.m. and Pitta's energy is being diverted to whatever else we're doing. So we're optimizing our sleep if we're in bed by 10 p.m. and we're optimizing our health, really, mentally and physically.
That's hard news for night owls, isn't it?
It is. And I myself was a self-proclaimed night owl before I started learning Ayurveda, and it was a difficult habit to change. But what I've learned is that really being a night owl is conditioned. And I know I was conditioned, my parents stayed up late. And then when I went off to college, that was the best thing, right? To just stay up late with your friends or doing homework or whatever. That was just what you did. And there was a bit of freedom in that. And I always just believed that I was more productive and more creative. But what I found when I started shifting my routine is that I was probably even more productive and creative if I just shifted that so I was going to bed earlier and waking up earlier. And that morning time was so valuable to me. And, it wasn't the end of the day. So I hadn't made 1,000 decisions already. I was refreshed, So I really believe that I'm more productive and more creative in the mornings.
That's great. So are the creative hours, would you say that that's early on in the day?
Yeah, so the creative hours are usually associated with Vata dosha. And so
Mhm.
that is 2 a.m. to 6 a.m., but I don't recommend getting up at 2 a.m. to be creative. Ayurveda typically recommends anywhere from 4:30 a.m. to 6 a.m. Um, and part of that is because we're doing a lot of our creative dreaming during those early Vata hours from 2 to 4 a.m., which is really important for our mental and emotional health because it's how we are processing our experiences. So then we can wake up and be creative during those final Vata hours. And then again, from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. is a good time to be creative.
That's great.
Yeah, that's the other Vata time of day.
Okay, so from 2 to 6. Oh,
Yeah,
2 to
2
6.
a.m. to 6
2
a.m. and 2 p.m.
a.m.
to
to
6
6
p.m.
a.m.
is Vata time.
and then
Yeah,
2 p.m. to 6 p.m. Okay,
right.
so I want to pick your brain then. So if somebody is interested in decluttering and organizing their home, um, when would you recommend that they do that? Is there
Yeah.
a best time of the day to declutter?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's going to sound really cliche, but spring is really the best time to do that spring cleaning. And the reason for that is in the winter, Kapha dosha is building up in us. That's what's supposed to happen because it helps to keep us insulated in the winter.
Huh.
But in the spring, as things start warming up, we want to start shedding some of that Kapha dosha. So it's all about this is when Ayurveda recommends to do detoxing, and decluttering as well, because we want to just clean our space out and welcome the new growth and the new life that spring offers.
That's so interesting. That like across cultures, right? Spring
Yeah,
cleaning
yeah,
is,
right.
is this concept that we take for granted, but I actually hadn't really thought about how it just plays into the natural cycles
Yeah,
and the seasons of life. That's
yeah,
beautiful.
yeah,
So earlier you had also mentioned that you had a pretty transformational experience with Ayurveda, and that's what brought you to your present day work. And
yeah.
I want you to share that story with us.
Oh, sure. Thank you for asking. So yeah, back in 2013, it was end of 2013, beginning of 2014, I was diagnosed with IBS or irritable bowel syndrome. And the doctors told me there was no cure and they weren't really sure how to treat it. My doctor offered medication, but he wasn't a big believer in it. And I really didn't want to be on medication for the rest of my life. And the other thing he offered was a diet, which honestly seemed to make things worse for me. So I was really frustrated at that point, and I decided I wanted to look at other healing modalities to see if I could find some, I just wanted to mitigate some of the symptoms I was feeling because at that point, I was canceling going out, for parties or just hanging out with friends. I even had to cancel a trip once. I had to change my flight because there was no way I was getting on that plane the way I was feeling.
Yeah.
So I started looking around, and I was very fortunate in that I happened to live very close to a school of Ayurveda, and they had a low-cost clinic where their students were helping people. And so I started there and took some of their recommendations little by little. Like most people, I was very resistant to a lot of the things they were saying, like going to bed early. But I started bringing those things into my life, and I noticed things were getting better. So I brought in a little more and things were getting better. So I decided to get serious, and I worked with an Ayurvedic practitioner for about a year and a half. And as of last month, it's now been 4 years since I've had an IBS episode.
It's incredible.
So yeah, it was amazing. And the really cool part is even though I went to Ayurveda to get healing for digestive issues, I got healing for so many other things because it really is about healing the root cause. And that root cause was causing all sorts of symptoms. So I had a rash that was called all sorts of different things by different doctors. One doctor even told me that I had it because I was getting old and my glands weren't working as well anymore, but I no longer had that rash. Yeah, I had that rash pretty bad for about 2 or 3 years, and it's been, I think, 5 years since I've had it now. The other thing, like I had seasonal allergies all of my life, and I don't have those anymore. I had hormonal imbalance issues from the time I was like a preteen that really caused some depression. By the time I was in my 30s, there were about 10 days out of the month that I felt like a normal person. And the rest of the time I was kind of a wreck because of these issues. And I don't suffer from that anymore. So it was life-changing. And at the time, I was working as a litigation consultant. I had my own business, but I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like this is so transformative. I really want to share this with other people because I knew a lot of people did not know about it. So yeah, so that's why I'm here today, talking to you, people who are open to hearing more about it. So I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah, no, I'm grateful for your recovery and
Yeah, me
and
too.
yeah, and that also brought us to this moment, right?
Yeah, exactly,
Because you've
exactly.
ignited your body's natural ability to heal. You can now help other people heal too.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
really, really awesome. Um,
yeah.
so what would you recommend to somebody who feels like there may be something out of alignment in their life? How can they go about creating more balance?
Yeah, that's a tough question because there's many ways we could be out of balance. Um, the first thing I would say is, understanding that your body has a rhythm and really starting to tune into your body. We are so disconnected from our bodies. It's sending us messages all the time and we don't realize it because we're so focused on what's happening outside of us.
Yeah.
So the first thing I would recommend is just starting to learn how to sit with yourself and really listen to your body. Ask what it needs. It'll tell you. It may take a while because if you're not tuned in, you may not understand how it's communicating with you, or have that line of communication opened. but but yeah, if you just set that intention to tune into your body, you'll learn a lot.
Yeah.
And then
That
talk to me.
yeah. We'll get to that in a moment. But
Yeah.
yeah, that tip reminded me of my friend a couple years ago. She was feeling so drained, and it wasn't until her colleague suggested that she see a doctor, that she was like,
Mm.
oh, okay, like she
All
just like
right.
accepted this chronic stress, this chronic fatigue as part of her life. She's like, I'm a
Yes.
teacher, like this is just how I'm supposed to feel. I'm always supposed to feel like I'm at the end of my rope, and and just constantly grading essays,
Right.
and she had never stopped to think that something was out of alignment.
Wow.
And then it was revealed that she has Hashimoto's.
Ah,
And so I thought that was so interesting, what we just accept as the truth,
right,
instead of
right.
getting curious about what our body is trying to tell us.
Yeah, yeah. We live in this culture where productivity is praised. And so we think we just have to be super productive, but it's really not good for our bodies and our minds and our spirits. So yeah, it's really important to reconnect with our bodies so that we know our limits.
Yeah, I think many of us have really shut down, right? That communication line between our minds and our bodies. And yeah, it's just about reopening that line of communication.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we're really conditioned to shut that down,
Yeah,
right? If we're going to be,
unfortunately.
yeah, if we're going to be a part of this uber productive society, it is asking us to shut that down. And so that's a big part of what I like to do is help people reconnect to their bodies and let them know It's okay to not be super productive. In fact, you're going to be more helpful to yourself and to other people if you're taking care of yourself.
Yeah, so important. So
Yeah.
important to remember that.
Yeah.
So how can we continue to connect with you and learn more about how to integrate Ayurvedic rituals into our daily lives?
Yeah. So you can find me at nmyogawellness.com. I'm also on Instagram as nmyogawellness. And yeah, so I offer online courses. That's the main part of how I work with people. There's a couple of courses, but basically I'm helping people, one, learn the habits that are going to help them optimize their health and well-being. They'll learn more about their dosha constitution so they can understand what nourishes them best. There are some constitutions that some forms of exercise aren't that great for. And so we really just dive into all of that. But also a big part of my work is helping people change. I realized when I first started doing this work, I could tell people about Ayurveda and make recommendations all day, but it was really what they needed help with is making change. Change is really hard.
Yeah.
And so that's a big part of the work I do. I bring habit change science and all sorts of things that I have learned along the way as I've been working with clients. So I've got 2 courses around that. I do some one-on-one coaching, but I really find that the group work, when you're in a course with other people who are doing the same things, that's where you get the momentum. That's where you get the results that you really want.
What is the name of your group program?
Thrive and Shine.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So check out Thrive and Shine. Check out Nicole's online courses. Let's start channeling in that spring energy and
Yeah.
really like clearing out the toxins in our bodies, in our spaces, and aligning ourselves with the greatest good and our highest selves.
Yes. Sounds
Nicole, thank you
awesome.
so much for your time today. It was
Monica, thank
a
you so
pleasure.
much for having me. Yeah, it was so fun talking to you.
Thanks again. Tune in next time for the next episode of This Calm Little Corner.